know, you'll see on our website that we say we're the greenest urban county in America. I really want us to be the sustainability capital of the United States. And so we've been recognized for our green efforts. I want us to be a model for the United States of America. We're going to have the only facility, renewable energy facility of this type in the Southeast. I don't take credit for it. It's people like Ted Reinhardt and Billy Malone and people who work in that area who I mean, that's why we go after the best talent, because, and what I try to do is to create an environment where these people can really do their jobs. And as long as my folks are doing their jobs, they'll tell you, I let them do their jobs. I don't lean on them. I tell them, you know, go do it. Now, you know, when they're not doing their jobs, that's when they hear from me. But when they're doing their jobs and promoting these kind of model programs, that's fine. One of the things I have to do as CEO is I have to model both reality and perception. And sometimes you inherit perceptions because they've been long-standing in communities, and it takes a long time, longer than you want, sometimes longer than one term, to turn a perception around. One of the things I know is that DeKalb County has a perception of, sometimes, of mismanagement. But DeKalb County, I've come to recognize, has some really dedicated, hardworking public employees, professionals who come to work and give their best each and every day, who could do what they do in the private sector if they chose, but they have a sense of calling. And those are the people who flourish in this environment. And so when I introduce some of the men and women along here, those are the kind of folks that they are. And the ones that didn't bring that kind of a mindset or that attitude to work no longer work. You know, I inherited some that did not. And to a large degree, they've gone. I mean, I had a very public fight with one public employee right after I became CEO. Y'all knew who it was. That guy needed to go, and he's gone. And he sued us several times, and he lost every time. But he didn't have the heart of a public servant. And so that's what you have. You got dedicated professional employees. We've reduced our workforce by almost 1,000 people since I've become CEO. That's a story that you're not going to just pick up your paper and see, because it's not about the Board of Commissioners, you know, taking a shot at the CEO taking a shot back at them. It's not a fight between two people. It's just the good news. When I say we've cut down $130 million in spending, well, a lot of that came through reduction in force. And so I want you to know that we're not bloated. Sometimes you'll see compared to other governments, but what they don't tell you is this. Let's take, I think Gwinnett County, they outsource their sanitation. We have one of the best sanitation outfits. And I know some of you don't like twice-a-week delivery, so what we're looking at right now is to take our recycling program and making it mandatory for the entire county, because we know that will take some of the load off of the regular trash pickup. So then we, in starting with an educational program to get people to understand what recycling is all about, as we then work to reduce one of our trash pickups a week, okay? So we're gonna phase that in. That's a process, is what I'm saying. But we've really got, I met with the folks from one of the trade publications in government, and we talked about some of the innovative things that we're doing in DeKalb County, because I think and I know because I meet with county officials from all over, and we have one of the best stories to tell. Now, Ted, do you want to talk about the path issue, and I'll let him go from there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the trail you mentioned is actively on our list. You mentioned a particular property owner that we need some right-of-way from. The city of Chamblee is willing to work with us on making the connection, but it is a matter of getting property owner support for some of the right-of-way we need to do it. We're going to keep working on that. We know we will be able to get that connection done. I mean, if push came to shove, we could take a condemnation action, but we really try hard to avoid that unless we just can't get a path that all the property owners agree on. But that one is high on the list.
And I don't want to say that some of the issues that we face as a county weren't deserved. We recognize to some degree that when we were on the wrong path, that we were on the wrong path and we needed to get on the right path. And I believe that we're doing that and have done that to a large degree. And we also recognize that we were in a differing, with the economic situation, things had changed. And we couldn't operate the same way we used to. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Williams.
Yeah, hey, Rebecca.
How are you?
It's good to see you.
I've enjoyed your One DeKalb brochure. I've read it pretty thoroughly. And I just have a question. The 7 new libraries that were built, the 4 new ones, the 3 expanded ones look beautiful. The rec centers, the 3 or 4 rec centers, and then
2 rec centers and a YMCA on the way.
okay, so 2 and 1. Anyway, about 15 projects, though, that include expanding or improving parks, about $25 million worth or so of capital improvements, look gorgeous. But I didn't see any north of I-85. And I was just wondering, you know, we've been waiting for a new library at Brookhaven. Our rec centers up here are pretty dilapidated. Our parks, well, they're terribly neglected and run down. We're kind of waiting for those improvements up here. And this is from the Parks Bond Fund, is that correct? So you even said before, the money is there. It's not part of this other budget crunch that we're all concerned about too. So is there anything in sight for anything up this part of One DeKalb?
I'm gonna let, no, we are One DeKalb, and I want you to know that we didn't select the projects both north and south. I'm gonna let Ted talk about the projects in North DeKalb, but the projects north and south was selected by the citizens when the referendum passed. And so what we've done is we've gone about completing those projects that were actually selected by the citizens. But you want to talk about some of those projects in North DeKalb?
Yes, sir. Yeah, as you know, the Park Bond did list very specific projects. One of them is here in Brookhaven area. It was stalled out for a long time because of the MARTA. The original plan was to do a cooperative transit-oriented development with MARTA that would include the library in that building, and that has not materialized. MARTA has been back and forth on their different property priorities, and so the library board will either go ahead and build on that site or will select another site and build in that area. But it is part of the bond program. They're reserving money for it. They are completing some of their other projects, and we'll have a couple properties at the end of the day they'll be able to sell, one in Tucker and another particular location that can ensure they have enough money in the account to do it. But here's really the tricky part to the whole library bond program. Even if what was originally planned as a transit-oriented development with MARTA had already been built and completed, done when originally planned, and MARTA had built its mixed-use development, et cetera, because the operating budget is so tight right now, the library has had to hold all their vacancies as have been coming open the last couple of years. And so when you saw the brand new Stonecrest Library, for instance, built, it sat empty for almost a year because the operating budget didn't have enough money to get the staff out there. And so it really has to start working in sync, that in addition to finishing the bond projects that the voters approved and you know are coming, we've also got to get back to the place where their operating budget's sufficient that they can put the staff into it. Right now, as one library's closed to be renovated or build a new one, they're moving those staff into another one because they can't keep all their vacancies filled at the same time and still balance their budget. But it is in the program and it is on the way. When it happens, though, is as much an issue of the operating budget being back in good shape as the construction itself happening. The Park Bond program, there was a lot of money, of course, spent at the Brook Run facility. It's now being operated by Dunwoody, the new skateboard facility up there. A lot of money was put into Murphy Candler sports facilities. There was a small building built at Ashford Park. And so there has been money spent here. Now, a lot of it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago or earlier in the program. But the program was meant to ensure there was some work throughout the county, but you got to remember there were also a lot of parts of the county that didn't have anything. You know, before Stonecrest Library was built, there wasn't a significant facility there. So it's been both balanced, but also focused on filling some deficiencies in areas that didn't have anything at all, and had to get something constructed.
I'll just say it. If you look at pages 19 and 20, you said north of 85 now. You know, I don't know how far up you're actually looking, but if you look at page 19 and 20, I saw a number, like I saw Mason Mill, Tucker, Barber Lohr, Embry Hills.
That's not north of 85.
Well, okay, on the northern half of the county. you know, every time we do a referendum, it's a bite out of the apple. We got a transportation referendum. We're going to go to 8:35 because I think we started about 5 minutes late today, and I guess I got to let Ronnie Mayer talk, and so I get everybody in. But you're going to be the last, and then I'll have the last word. Okay. So, but what I'm saying is that it's a common theme. So if there's one thing about, you know, as a lawyer, one of the things I learned that you had a good negotiation if you made everybody equally unhappy, and to some degree the same is true in politics. I can tell you when I go down to South DeKalb, here's what I hear. Everything's going to North DeKalb. I mean, really. And when I'm in North DeKalb, this is what I hear. Everything's going to South. I heard it down at the Capitol today. Someone said South DeKalb is getting everything. And I just kind of scratched my head and turned to my chief of staff and said, yeah, but we hear the flip side of that. So we have some considerable needs. I think we're doing a good and equitable job of meeting the needs, but we're you know, obviously not able to give everybody everything that they want, particularly in a down economy, because then taxes would just go out of the roof. Okay, did you want to ask a quick follow-up, Rebecca?
Well, obviously, some of this feeling of neglect up in this part of the Brookhaven part of DeKalb is leading towards this movement, I think, contributing to some degree to the movement for a cityhood. Are you and the county going to actively lobby against that?
Well, I spoke at the Capitol today. You weren't going to let me get out of here without talking about that, right? I spoke at the hearing today, and some of you were there. And essentially, what I said is I wasn't speaking for it, and I wasn't speaking against it, but I was speaking on behalf of fairness. And it seems to me that what's going on right now is that we have a race to the State House. We've got citizens that are proposed to be drawn within this city, and some that are not proposed to be drawn within the city. And what I heard those who want the vote to go forward, they talked about, you know, the right to vote, the right to vote. And I understand the right to vote, and I fundamentally agree with the right to vote. And I fundamentally agree with the right for our citizens to be able to choose how they want to be governed, the type of government that they want. But the problem you have here is not just a group of citizens deciding on the governance for just them. They're also deciding on the governance for some of our choicest commercial areas that are adjacent to the residential areas, in other words, that were drawn in those areas, and that are going to impact those who are not being drawn either within the boundaries for the new city or those areas won't have an opportunity to be annexed. Now, what I heard is that if we don't go now, because I'll tell you where I'm headed towards the wait position, and the wait position doesn't mean, I heard somebody says, whoa means no. That's what I heard today. Well, for me, whoa doesn't mean no. I think we need more information on Brookhaven, and we need more information before we allow any of the other cities to annex those commercial areas as well. Because what's happening with these cities is that they're really subsidizing their operations on the commercial areas. That's what happened with Dunwoody. And now Dunwoody's, I was reading a report before I went over to the Capitol today. Dunwoody's police chief is saying that we can't operate and have a first-class police operation on the budget that you have proposed for us, or that you have for us. And you know, he was careful in his language. He says, you know, I know this is going to take time, but this is where we have to get to. So, you know, where I am on this, I think that we need to put the brakes on. We need to get all the information and all the questions answered, because, I appreciate the applause, but I'm telling you, there's a group of people that were on a bus today would disagree with everything I'm saying. And so I'm just telling you how I feel. I feel, because I have a responsibility as CEO to represent all the citizens of the county and to make sure that whether you know, and I know everybody won't get to vote, but even for those who don't get to vote, I have a responsibility to make sure that they get full information. I have to make sure that the ones who get to vote are fully informed. I heard some very good information today about the age of the infrastructure and the poverty level and how that might impact crime. And so I understand feasibility studies, but that's where we ought to start. We shouldn't take a feasibility study and then run up to the Capitol and say, okay, give us a city or let us vote. because the vote is only going to be voted on by the 49,000, not the 735,000 citizens who make up all of DeKalb County. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to, here's the problem. The current policy, the current processes we have in place, they pit the county against the cities. They pit the cities against the other cities. And they pit people against people, neighbors against neighbors. And Larry, you asked me something about one DeKalb and how I felt. And I said, everything I try to do as CEO, before I reacted, and sometimes I got to really, hold myself because I take some shots, but I care first and foremost that I want to be able to say that I left DeKalb. I mean, I'm like anybody else in any other job. I want to be able to say I left DeKalb County better than I found it in a lot of ways. Fiscally better, but as a community, I want us to be better. And if, that's the greatest legacy a CEO could have, really, to leave, or anybody could have, to leave whatever God has entrusted you with, because we're stewards, better than you found it. And so, no, I think we need to wait. I do think we need to study this thing. Somebody said together, if you have the passion, you'll have the patience, I think I heard, because the patience won't go away. And the passion won't go away, and so you'll be able to wait. But at the same time, that doesn't give the cities that already exist license to go and grab those areas. No, we got to tell everybody to wait. And that's the fair thing and the right thing to do, I believe. I think you get the last question on this side, and then you two will get the last two questions.
This might have already been taken care of in the past. It's to deal with the property tax assessment. I noticed that land is now worth more than developed land. It's the same bottom line. My property is worth the same amount of money, is assessed the same amount of money, but an undeveloped piece of land is worth more now than like the one with my home on it. I was just wondering how that becomes, how it got switched around and why.
Yeah, I don't know if I can respond to that, and usually my chief appraiser, Calvin Hicks, oh, he's here. He's hiding. Come on up here, Mr. Hicks. We got to end by 8:40. Okay. I got to talk about transportation, and I'm gonna do it fast.
You will recall that for the last 3-4 years, we've been on a moratorium. So even if it was undeveloped land, we could not increase the value beyond what it was in 2008. This year should be the first year that we come out from under the moratorium. If in fact the market indicates that land should be valued higher, we will do it. Now there is a pending piece of legislation that would place another moratorium in place. I don't know if it's going to survive or not, but we will really have to depend on that and see what occurs.
But that's what I don't understand is before the year 2010, say the total value is $100,000 and the land is worth $20,000 and the home is worth $80,000. Now it's switched. I don't understand the logic behind that.
Detailed answer. The capital system that we had previously would not allow us to make adjustments to the land. All the adjustments were made to the improvement. Over time, that caused a distortion between the allocation between land and improvements. So what we did was go back and basically reset that. Not change the value of the property because your assessment is 40% of the total value. That did not change. So there was no change in your tax liability. But we did reset the allocation between land and improvements because in essence, that's what the market basically said it was. A number of areas where the quote mini mansions are being built, people look at that property, they'll pay X number of dollars for it, go in and tear the improvement down. What that means is many of those existing improvements have very little contributory value. So the value is actually in the land. So what we attempted to do was place our appraisals in line with what the market was telling us was there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Yes.
Good evening, CEO. I'm Nikki Vandergrinten from Dresden East Civic Association.
Good to see you again.
That area that was not taken into Brookhaven. But anyway, that you were referring to, but that's not what I want to talk about. I really wasn't going to talk about this tonight, except for the fellow who started talking about the billboard that was keeping him awake at night, the flashing thing. Well, I was talking to somebody from the county who I respect and who I think knows something, and he said we were talking about billboards in general, and he says, you know, you ought to check with the county and see what kind of tax revenue they get from these billboards. And he was under the impression that there was maybe nothing, but I can't hardly believe that. But how would I find out about that? And I'd like to know, you know, because these billboards cost maybe $500,000, some of them.
One of the recommendations that came from the Revenue Enhancement Commission that I mentioned that we had several top people serve on to identify non-tax sources of revenue is that we weren't doing this, that we value our billboards based upon their income potential, I think, and not just based on, I'm looking for either Joel, I might have to ask Mr. Hicks to come. Did Joel leave? Joel? Where's Joel? Remember how one of the recommendations of the Revenue Enhancement, and you can speak from there, one of the recommendations was that we change the way that we actually value billboards. And I believe we sent that to the Board of Commissioners. Do you know what happened with that? Do you recall that?
I will check on it.
Mr. Hicks, do you know anything about that?
The value.
I think he may know about it. And that was one of the recommendations. I think we sent it to the board, but I'm not sure what's
Initially, the problem was when billboard owners make their return, they return their assets in group, in mass. There was no description of where the billboard was located. So one of the things with planning we're looking at is, first of all, telling us where it is and what type of billboard it is, the size, board size, and location. With that information, we can then come in and use the income approach to determine the value of the property. Now, when the discussion first started, we were still within the moratorium. So even if we switched to the income approach and it indicated a higher value should be on there, we would not have been able to implement it until after 2011.
And I want everybody to understand this is a moratorium that was put forth by the General Assembly, which affects only DeKalb, is that right?
All counties in the
all
state.
Counties?
Yeah,
okay.
That was House Bill 233.
Okay, so as income on the value of property falls, we've got to adjust down, but as it rises, we're capped. Is that right? 3% a year?
Well, no cap. It simply said the moratorium did not prevent you from decreasing values, but you could not increase the value
until the property is sold.
Well, even if it's sold, you could not increase it above whatever value was there in 2008.
Okay, so makes it tough on us.
So how much tax revenue are you getting from a billboard? $500,000 billboard.
Well, we are getting it. Depends on the cost, because right now they're returning it based on the cost of that billboard. Now, with the cost approach, that's depreciating, though. So with the income approach, we anticipate it will be higher. You're going to have a fight because a part of that income goes to the business enterprise, not just the real estate, so you're going to have to allocate that out. But typically, the value will be higher using the income approach than on the cost approach. What makes up what they acquired for? What does it cost to construct it, to buy it, and construct it?
That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
His question is, if it's a 20-year-old billboard, then we're not getting a whole lot for it because it didn't cost a lot 20 years ago.
You would have a very, very low value on that because it typically is depreciating.
So we need some help from the state in order to fix that problem, is what I'm hearing. Yes?
Mr. CEO, welcome to Brookhaven National Park and all your whole team here. You got a great team. It's sad we've only seen you here a few times this year. Hopefully.
You say that every time I come.
Hopefully, you know, I've been to the Capitol today.
I can't tell you. You're making me look bad. Now, I can't tell you how many times.
I'm going to make you look good now.
This guy has me out here, takes me on tours. He'll entice me with a meal. But, I mean, come on.
All right, let me finish now. All right. I was at the Capitol today. I've been down at the Maloof building the other half of the evening. And I want to welcome you here. And I want to invite you here more often because we really need to see your happy face around here more often. I wasn't going to say nothing about the library, but I am now because y'all brought it up first. The library, we want to see some of the tax dollars spent here in the Brookhaven area. We've been promised a police precinct, and even though they're zoning the city of Chamblee down to here, which we wanted in Brookhaven if it was going to become, but I still want the police precinct on the airport property down here on Claremont. That will make me happy because we have no police presence on the airport property. We have got a new great relationship with the manager of the airport here, Mike. We have never had such a great relationship with the airport before with problems. If there's ever a problem, it gets handled now. But we would like to see some of the tax dollars spent here in Brookhaven. We want a police precinct there. But I hear you say that we have to sell properties. Where's my $3.2 million we voted for our library? And I mean, I've been screaming for 2 years, it doesn't make sense to put a library. Well, if I built a 10-story building and I was going to rent out spaces, I sure wouldn't give the first floor to the library going, here, have this. These restaurants, we'll throw them somewhere else. It doesn't make sense to put a library at the MARTA station. It makes more sense like if you go over here to Masonville Park, you see a gorgeous park, you see a gorgeous library, you see it all flowing. That's what I see over here at Osborne Road and Peachtree. A Peachtree Road frontage, whether it becomes a city of Brookhaven or not, is still a DeKalb County Brookhaven library with Peachtree Road frontage that you can say that it got built in your era. And that's what I want on DeKalb County property. You don't have to buy anything. You can build an art center. Years ago when we elected you, you said we're going to work the different teams together. The arts people, the parks people, this is great. You got library, arts, and park people working hand in hand, full basement. We could have all our festivals over there. We could have a library there and still leave the other building that's there now. I mean, the folks that are there now raising heck that, no, we're not gonna get rid of them. There's a room right on Peachtree Road to build a library, but we want some of our tax dollars spent right now. I don't wanna wait 3 years on the library when they go, oh, we're out of money, because I said in the beginning, we're gonna be the last ones, and we already have people here running our library. So how do we have to hire new people? But if we build a new library here, I guarantee you we can find enough people to volunteer to be there to run this thing for our young adults and children to be able to learn to go get a book. You can even build a coffee shop there, get a cup of coffee, rent that space out for revenue, get a cup of coffee, get a book, take your grandchild for a walk in the park. Everything's a win-win-win. But like I say again, y'all do a great job. The only other thing that I want to say is the other morning, my wife thought I was choking. I jumped up, I was watching the news, and somebody said that DeKalb County was going to spend over $1 million to build a soapbox derby track on the south side of town. I about choked and sat up, and I said, why don't we get some of the other things done than a soapbox derby track? I think there's a lot more important things than that. But the only thing I'm going to hit on, and I'm going to leave you alone because you do it. I like Ted, his gang, everybody here, the chiefs, they're brothers now, you know. The fire chief and police chief, they're brothers. So it works good that way.
Now,
But the one thing,
Ronnie, you got to come on time. We've already talked about the soapbox derby track.
I've been at 2
about
meetings.
the O'Brien brothers.
All right, I know, but
Okay,
I've been at other 2 meetings trying to serve our community.
All right.
But what I'm saying, my wife is a real estate agent, and she works for 6 builders. And I hear their frustration. I go to dinner with all 6 builders, and I see their frustration. They beat their head up against the wall when they go down there for these permits. I bought a foreclosure house, and I donated to the fire and police department to do all the training in it for a month and a half. I caught more flack from the neighbors because all the fire trucks were in the neighborhood. I know, but to get all the permits to tear it down and to build a new house have been an act of Congress. And I know right now of 7 houses over $800,000 that want to be built in Brookhaven right now, that the permits and everything are being held up by some people down there that just that work so far in that office that don't care. And you could go hide a bag over your head and not let them know who you were, and walk down there with them and listen to how they talk to these people. You'd be amazed to know why nobody's building new houses around here, but just a few who just will stand there and just take that abuse. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ronnie. You've touched on about 10 different things, so I'll try to at least get a couple of the big ones. The police station you mentioned, that was funded through a recovery zone bond from the Stimulus Act, the County Foreign Redevelopment Agency, for that site you talked about at the airport. It has to be built at that site with those bonds because we can't use it somewhere else. The plans are done. The architect's finished. Those have gone to purchasing. They'll advertise them through the competitive process like they do. But that one's pretty much a done deal because it's funded. It's got to be that site because that's what the bonds are for. And the plans are done. They're in purchasing. So you should see that under construction by the end of the year.
Are we going to have a Homeland Security office out of there too to handle the airport?
I think it's about a 9,000 square foot building, one-story building. It'll have room to expand in the future, but for the time being, I think it's just a standard police precinct, and they're probably going to relocate some of the stuff you see at the Dunwoody precinct to that precinct, and it'd be very similar setup. The library, it's complicated to explain all the finances of the bond because for a while, as the operating budget got worse, they had to use bond money to buy the books for the new libraries. They had previously expected their operating budget would still buy books for new libraries. Because of that, they had to move some money from some accounts to cover that. But like I told you, we have a couple buildings that are going to be available for sale that'll fix that account. The library board's still committed to doing a library in Brookhaven, and they know there's some good ideas about what the right way is to do it, and the board will consider all that and make a final decision. But like I said, even if it were already built and open, because of the operating budget, they just don't have enough money to cover all the staff, and it would be a much bigger library, so it would take some more electricity, books, staff, and everything. But they're still committed to do it. It's just a question of when. And Soapbox Derby, as the CEO mentioned, the parks bond had specific categories, and one of those categories was a partnership with the YMCA where we would acquire Brandsby, they would donate that money back into the project, we would do the new Wyatt Wade Walker, and they would operate it. And in part of that partnership project, the board approved, kind of internal to that one account in the bond, acquiring some additional land next to Brandsby, partnering with the Y on doing that, and then building this soapbox facility, which can then tie into all the different partnerships that we're working throughout that part of the county, or land at Arabia Mountain, opportunities for camping, bike trails, partnership with both Brandsby and Wade Walker Y. And so it doesn't detract from other things that can happen around the county because it's internal to that specific park bond account and program. It's not as if we could have taken money from that account and done more neighborhood parks in a different part of the county. It's just part of the uniqueness of bond financing. But I think everything you've heard from everybody today is about partnership, and there can be win-wins for everybody if we keep doing exactly the kind of stuff you were describing.
Are we still using the
Ronnie, we got to run. But three things about the Soapbox Derby track. It's not coming from the general fund. It's coming from the parks bond money. Number two, it's primarily for the kids and to introduce kids to a new activity. We've got two soapbox associations. They're ready to merge and to come to our track if there's a dedicated facility, and it's going to promote economic development. But the main reason is
I got to ask though is I drive up 78. And during the Olympics, we had a swim tennis center, big time out there. Does that belong to DeKalb? Because I hear they're fixing to bulldoze that whole facility.
Are you talking about the tennis facility? You said swim, tennis.
Tennis. Does that belong to DeKalb?
No, that's in Gwinnett County.
Okay.
Okay. Let me thank you all for your good questions and your attentiveness and caring about your county and community. I want to especially thank Principal McIntyre, who's principal here. Where are you, Principal McIntyre? Okay, wave so I can see you. Okay, thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. And Mike Elliott, thank you so much for helping coordinate everything. Here's all I have time to say about the transportation referendum. You're going to hear a lot about it. It's going to be this July, a vote for a penny regional sales tax. DeKalb County stands to get a lot out of this referendum. $1.3 billion in improvements in exchange for $800 million in sales tax raised here. Good return on investment for DeKalb County. So just be watching, paying attention, and know that that vote's coming up, and it'll be important to go to the polls for that. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Look forward to working with you.